Okay, it looks like I'm on and I'm live. This is my second try, and we'll see if anybody actually becomes a part of this. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna open up my screen. That way you can see my screen instead of my ugly face. And whoa, that's infinity. I'm gonna close that one out. There we go. There we go. I'll just get rid of that. Here's what I got. Let's see if I can find my Chrome history and all of this stuff. Nope, that's not it. It's this. And we were taking a look at, and I'd be interested to know if anybody else is on this right now. We'll see. I don't know if I'm able to. Oh, I got 4 viewers. That's good. I'm going to see if there's a way I can find out whether or not you can hear me by having you. You can't chat because your Google chat got turned off. So why don't somebody email my address, not either Leiden or to, there you go, Veronica. I can't hear you. Oh, I can hear you. Okay, great. I can hear you. I can't read, apparently. All right, so we're good. But I want to allow you guys to have some kind of a back channel where you can actually have conversations with me. So if you know of a site that allows you to just kind of stream comments, and I can keep them on the screen here, the way that like kind of Periscope does, let me know. Send me the name of that site. And the answer to my question is can. Okay, you can hear me, yes. All right, that's a few seconds behind. Yeah, I want one of those sites that's going to allow us to do what they call back channel conversations. And I can't remember. I used to have one, but I can't remember what they are anymore. Anyway, what we're going to be looking at tonight is looking at Cesar Chavez's letter to Dr. King, or not to Dr. King, about Martin Luther King and nonviolent resistance as opposed to violent resistance. And again, let's see if anybody knows of a site that allows us to, I mean, it should be this one, but of course, you guys can't do Google Hangouts, or you can't do Google Chats. So maybe there's some other site that allows us to do something like that, where it's like just a string of comments. I've seen that. Anybody? Can I go? Oh, kind of like this, I guess. So here we go. This is the one that I wanted you to read. And as we're reading it, I also want to take a look at the AP Review. AP Review 2016. Because these are the main things that we're looking at as we're looking at this, as we're looking at any review sites or any. Sorry, got my head right now. So I did this entire thing in school, and now I'm having to redo it. Okay, so we're looking at rhetorical analysis. There were 3 questions. This is the second question, the rhetorical analysis. I wanted to focus on that today. And here's what we find when we look at that. What I like to do with these is consider this framework. I like to consider what's the exigence, who's the audience, what's the purpose. We kind of went over this stuff, and you're going to see how it shows up as we look at any of these sites. So let's take a look at this one real quickly. And I hope that you have read through it, but if you haven't, please, I'll try and go nice and slow here. The letter is was published in an article in a magazine of a religious organization devoted to helping those in need. So we have to consider that the audience is readers of a religious organization. We also know that the occasion is the 10th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. So he is arguing for nonviolent resistance in honor of Dr. King, but also with the possibilities that on the 10th anniversary of his assassination, there might be, as there were then, riots. And how does one respond to injustice in the world as a result of that? If we take a look at the opening here, he addresses that exigence right off the bat by specifically referring to Dr. King in his opening here. He talks about it giving us the best possible opportunity to recall the principles to which our struggle has grown and matured. In doing this, what he's doing is he's connecting his own struggle, his own nonviolent resistance struggle of people that are working for rights, the farm workers movement, with Dr. King. So he starts out, he uses the exigence of the situation to combine the two things. And we can see this as a strategy, but for me, when I'm looking at this, what I try and do is I try and I'll annotate this as exigence across here. And if you will bear with me for a second, I think I have an app that'll allow me to do that real quickly on this other thing. I think I can actually write on here if I can open up this other thing. So please hold. If I can just remember what it's called. Brunk. This is when you should go get a glass of water or something, because it's called Doceli, I think. Here it is. Doceri. And it should allow me to write on the screen in just a second. So I can write on that. Don't try the last. It's a good thing there's no... Yeah, see, I'm still not hearing from anybody, so I'm not sure. I'll recheck this. Let's see. Nope, not hearing from anybody. Desktop connection failed. Oh, I got to open up Doceri on this. And I've lost it. What has happened to that app? Okay, well, I don't want to re-download the font, or the program, so I won't. Just to remind you then, what we're doing is we're looking at the top here. We're immediately identifying the exigence, but the first thing that I notice about this is that we are combining his movement. We're not combining it. What we're doing is associating Mr. Chavez's movement with Dr. King's movement. You can see that they're associating themselves with this religious organization, which means that they're associating themselves with the authority of religion. At this point, we start seeing that he's going to contrast nonviolence with violence. And whenever there's a contrast paper, I want you to consider that you can always, that this is the point at which I start thinking about the shape of my paper, because it turns out where normally I would say follow the shape of the paper. We've talked about that, how, this is the first part, this is the second part, this is the third part. In this one, I don't see a real clear progression that I can follow. So what I would do with this particular one is, after having read this, it occurs to me that the biggest shape in this piece is the contrast between violence and nonviolence that he tries to define here. So that contrast could very much be the way that I shape my essay. So at this point, we see we're convinced that nonviolence is more powerful than violence. So he immediately, right off the bat, he defines nonviolence as powerful and more powerful than violence. He associates it through his diction with justice and morality. He calls it crucial. Meanwhile, in the next sentence, he contrasts that with violence, in which he considers a logical argument that the causation of violence, that the causal effects of violence are going to be injuries and perhaps death and demoralization. That's the causal argument. This is a logical causal argument. Then again, he comes back to nonviolence and tells us about that. So we can see that he's putting one against the other, one against the other. Meanwhile, he associates it with the American people. And you can see where this falls into ethos now. And these are the things I'm scribbling down on paper. If I had them, I'd put a little ethos there. I'd circle words like justice. I'd circle positively. I talk about the support of millions who have a conscience. Meanwhile, again, and then he says you have to be sincere about it, because if it fails, our only alternative is to turn to violence. And so we must balance the strategy with a clear understanding of what we're doing. And in this case, what he's doing is he's qualifying his argument a bit, saying not only will we use nonviolence, but we're not going to use it as a strategy. It's actually something that we have to do in action as well. And we have to be honest about it. And his plea for honesty is a qualification of his argument. And again, what I'm trying to do as I'm going over this is I'm trying to use as much terminology as I can. And I would scribble this terminology down on the page because I would want to use that terminology when I write my essay. I can organize it and see it on the page in a way that's going to make it easier to outline it. If I have to go back and remember all this terminology, I'm in big trouble. I'm not in big trouble. It's just a lot harder, I think. Let's see. We continue when we talk, again, there's so much in terms of diction we can relate to that. And remember, diction, tone, and syntax, those are the easy ones to make sure that we note. Of course, by the way, I told you when you look at one of these, make sure that you take a look at the things that kind of stand out. And you can see Gandhi's in here, MLK's in this, the American people are in this, and MLK, Gandhi. That's a lot of good people. Anyway, he refers to nonviolence as weapons. It's a way to avoid senseless violence. So the connotation of using, talking about power and weapons, using all of these things that we generally associate with aggressiveness, and he applies them to nonviolence, which is a really strong move on his part. He also calls violence a shortcut there. He talks about the effect of victory when we have violence, as opposed to victory without it. Again, talking about the causation, which relates to this. I suppose if you did want to break this up into two different ways, you might talk about the philosophical approach that he takes here in defining it, the actual actions, and then the effect. But he has so much effect over here as well. I don't know that I would necessarily do that. Again, I think it's a lot easier to break it up in terms of those two areas, violence and nonviolence. Anyway, suddenly he brings up history here in this strangely disorganized essay. He starts bringing up history, who gets killed in the case of a violent resolution. So again, he's alluding and appealing to history, an argument of precedent to indicate how things would go now. He's kind of vague in it, and we have to ask ourselves that question. Why is it that he's vague in his reference to history and precedent? The only reason you would be vague, assuming that you're a careful writer, and we have to assume he's a careful writer, would be that you're trying to avoid implicating anybody. Again, trying to avoid creating any enemies through this essay. The final part of this, here we go. The final part of this, where normally we would be looking for a call to action at the end of a political speech, this is a letter. And his call to action is a really interesting one, because in this, he does talk about victory coming soon. He does talk about the future, but in doing so, his call to action toward the future, remember there's that shift of tense that we have, where he looks at how we should behave in the near future. This call to action is a call to inaction, which I think is a really, it's a great opportunity to say something clever about the conclusion as well. So again, just to review, he associates the cause of violence with famous peaceful people, God, the American people. His diction also associates nonviolence not only with really fantastic things such as justice and rights and growth mature. He, at the same time, what he also does is he, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. He also employs diction that associates violence with failure. And some of the words that do that, let's see, I'm sorry, he also uses crucial, which is good for it. I remember what I was going to say, that violence is also associated with power in this. He talks about it being more powerful. He talks about it being more crucial. He talks about it is a more active thing. He redefines or reframes violence as something else entirely. So there's so much we can do with diction in this essay in terms of how the diction redefines the subject matter. And we always want to think in those terms of what is the rhetorical strategy, number one, what is the effect of the rhetorical strategy on the message, number two, and then number three, what is the effect of that message, the intended effect of that message then upon the audience. And we want to look for all three of those things whenever we are doing rhetorical analysis. There was one thing that, the thing that kind of made me lose my train of thought here was this. He talked about people becoming frustrated when they're faced with insurmountable odds. And that's the other part of the big qualifier that's here. He says, you can't just use it as a tactic, but at the same time, we know that a lot of people are going to get frustrated by this. So there's got to be a way of achieving justice. But he acknowledges this counterclaim and qualifies his argument with the understanding that the seething exists in every farm worker and that these things lie heavy. So his argument for nonviolence includes a qualifying statement and an acknowledgement of a valid counter argument as well. And you can see, again, it may seem like I'm just throwing a million things out here, but that's your job. Throw those millions of things out there, then figure out the shape of your essay, and then put all those things where they go in terms of the shape of your essay. So my shape is going to be a big part about nonviolence, a big part about violence, and all those things that fit into all of those different areas. And I think that's all I wanted to say in terms of looking at this. All right. Now we'll take a look at the way that some people responded to this essay. Okay, which is what we got here. And I'm going to check real quickly to see if anything's come through. Any comments from anybody? Veronica, any comments from anybody? Let's see. Nobody, huh? All right. See, this seems to imply that it hasn't started, but I know it's started. I hate this thing. Having done this and spent an hour on this, I am so afraid that it's just not working. So again, if you could send me another validation that I'm actually broadcasting this, I would certainly appreciate it. Anybody? Okay, let's see, maybe anyone? All right, well, let's look at the way that somebody answered these questions. So here's the way that this kid answered it. And if you'll notice at the top here, they start out with the exigence. The 60s was the height of the civil rights movement. After his assassination, there were many calls for violent response. So now we know the frame and the context of this argument. It's one thing to just talk about civil rights movement. It's quite another thing to talk about the violence that was expected after it, and that provides the context for this particular thing. There we go. Pick 720 quality RIA. It's working. RIA. Oh, okay. Oh, it is the whole thing. Okay. The screen is blurry. We can't see the words on the passage. Can you fix that? No free chat for one. There's something I did it like watching debates a couple of years ago, but thank you very much for the validation that it's working. I appreciate that. Anyways, when we take a look at this guy here, or woman, you'll see they start, again, defining that exigence and providing the frame for this. Now, what you're going to find that's kind of interesting about this one, then they bring it down to Cesar Chavez particularly, and then we get striking diction, juxtapositions, and appeal to fundamental beliefs of his readers, leave his audience with little doubt as to the proper course of action. At this point, what they've done is they have told us their shape, and that's exactly what your thesis ought to do, is ought to indicate the shape of the essay to come. However, you might think at this point, okay, well, wait a minute, diction, juxtapositions, and appeals to fundamental beliefs, that's not following the structure of the piece. It's not. But what it will do is within those paragraphs, it will follow a structure. The development will follow the way that the diction is used throughout the piece, the way that juxtapositions are used throughout the piece, and appeals to fundamental beliefs are used throughout the piece, to the degree that they were able to do so very quickly. So if you end up feeling more comfortable breaking things up by rhetorical strategy, that's great, but then find a string that you can follow, an actual logical string of the way that the diction is used, juxtapositions. So you have to find more than just one. You can't find like one juxtaposition and then decide that's going to be a whole paragraph, because that's not going to work for you. And that's what some people were doing, where they'd say, you know, there's an appeal to authority. They find the one appeal to authority, and that ends up being a whole paragraph. And that's not a whole paragraph. That's one thing that you noticed. Here's what we mean by this. This writer starts at the very beginning in regard to this. Chavez, less than 10 words into his request, has already tied nonviolence to power. Thus, followed by his claims of nonviolence provides an opportunity to stay on the offensive, gives his readers the impression that nonviolence is innately connected to power and importance. So this is the association I was talking about. It's innately connected with this at this point. He goes on to say that those who are truly concerned about people will not stray from the path of nonviolence. This writer now tells us what he said, but right away within that same sentence, in an ing, what we're going to call a participle phrase, tagged onto the end of the sentence, giving his readers no choice but to agree if they want to consider themselves good people. A lot of people that in my class have been writing things like they'd finish the sentence here, from the path of nonviolence, and then they'd say, this gives his readers no choice. That's okay. Cross out this gives. Whenever you have this gives, this, that, whenever you have this as your pronoun opening up a sentence, just get rid of it and make it a participle phrase hanging from the end of the sentence. I mean, don't do it every time, I suppose, but do it enough that you have longer sentences in there that have a better syntactical feel to them than a bunch of short sentences that break up the relationship between what the strategy is and what the strategy accomplishes. Now they're just going to give you a bunch of words, because in this, we're going to be talking about the contrasts of the words, freedom and democracy. On the one side, to harsher, unforgiving terms like vicious type of oppression and no honor to describe violence. But that's not enough. Convinces to his audience, or convinces, I'm not sure, his audience, that violence is a horrid thing. Horrid thing? Horrible, maybe, thing? While nonviolence and peaceful resistance embodies the virtues of America and citizens everywhere. Not a great speller here, but such fantastic sentences that they don't care so much. Although he considers possible protests, we're not blind, so you got that. So again, I really want you to notice, I gotta, hold on one second, I gotta take my notes out on this particular essay. That in this paragraph, hold on, I gotta take out my glasses because I'm old. Oh, brother. Hold on. Where's this? Where's my infinity screen? Infinity. Yikes. Let's see. Whoa, what's that? I don't know what that was. Whoa. Hey, I'm back. I'll give you my screen again. Hold on. Showcase screen share. Oh, it's happening again. Okay. Hey, throw me a note. I guess, do I have to redo this every time? Nothing. Oh, wait, lots of things. The score of the essay that I'm reading right now is a 9. Or no, sorry, an 8. It's an 8. I gotta just keep reloading that. My notes on here for this. So the first paragraph is all about diction, and you know, the words that they used to describe the diction were really important. The diction was striking, contrasting, powerful. They talked about juxtaposition. These are all important terms, and we've covered them before. They talk about building through the piece, and the structure was praised by the scorers. Oh, and I wanted to note this thing down here, which is served the purpose of shaming the readers. So again, this idea that you have a writer saying, here's all the stuff that Chavez did in order to serve the purpose of the readers who advocate for violence, strengthen the support of nonviolence. And then finally, coercive diction, which is fantastic. And so again, just the constant connection between what the writer was doing and what they were trying to accomplish, what goals it served, and the effect on the audience. The final sentence here, and for those of you that don't like doing this because you feel like it's mechanical, too bad. They have a conclusion sentence to their paragraph that holds this paragraph together. It is not in any way looking forward to this sentence. Okay? This sentence, when you get here, worry about connecting it to here. Don't worry about where you're going yet. Unify and complete this paragraph first with a good closing sentence. I also wanted you to notice this. The subject is diction. The verb is delineates. If instead you had written Chavez uses diction, what are you going to do here to to coerce and juxtapose? Man, that's going to be tough. Just say his diction, his coercive diction juxtaposes, and juxtaposition delineates the prose of nonviolence. You can see how when you make the subject, when you make the strategy the subject, you can have far more interesting verbs, and that is what this writer consistently does. At any rate, in this second one, they juxtapose the two movements while contrasting historical allusions, but that's not enough. It's not, they certainly don't say there are a lot of historical allusions. Say he also juxtaposes them while contrasting historical allusions, but that's not even enough. Why? To give more credibility to the argument. Oh, and then to what they do with this while portraying peaceful protests in a favorable light. So again, this is the strategy and this is the effect. That's not exactly true in that case, but let's just say that works. You can see that there are the occasional missteps. Chavez uses Gandhi. You could say that he alludes to Gandhi, but then they wouldn't be able to write this sentence the way that they've written it, and it would require a big change. But you can see that the second paragraph is all about historical allusions and the contrasting ones. Continually throughout this paragraph, the writer says, by doing this, he was able to accomplish this. By directly following this, he portrays the movement as this, and then followed it up to win the support of Chavez followers. Again, same sort of thing. By using these, he manages to do this. And what does that do? Well, it encourages readers. That's that three-part structure that I just keep talking about. Here's what he was doing. Here's why he did it. Here's the intended effect on the audience. Just keep bringing it from the strategy to the message to the people. Any words from these folks? Oh, new message. There we go. Maybe I can get this thing. Show. Georgia. This is enlightening detail, well written. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Finally, the third paragraph on this is all about the moral appeals, and they relate it to the context in which it's used, which is a religious magazine. And again, by advocating this, he does this, and that is the effect on the. And then here's the thing over here. He does this, and again, just that. You know, I'm beating this thing to death, but it's so important in rhetorical analysis that we do this thing. By doing this, he does this, and that's the effect on the audience. The conclusion, by the way, in the religious, in the moral appeals one, they talk about appealing to religious deities, religious duty, invoking God. The effect is mandating nonviolence and dissuading from oppressors. Mandating, dissuading, those are good verbs. The conclusion is kind of interesting. Not only uses powerful contrast to portray his cause favorably, but also appeals to his audience's sense of decency and religion, to leave them with the idea. Leave them with the idea. That's a nice thing to have in a conclusion, that nonviolence is only truly successful and the only moral way to achieve their goals. Okay, let's take a look for the point of understanding how you don't do it nearly as well, but still get a 6, which is walking that fine line, but here's a 6. Yes, I'm going to show you the 6 right now. Let's take a look at the difference in the way they handle the exact same things here. The civil rights movement was one that changed American society drastically. Just to remind you, what we had up here was specifically about Martin Luther King. The height of the civil rights movement after King's assassination, there were many calls for violence. They provide this context in order to talk about the assassination and the relationship between the assassination to violence. So it was very specific about the exigence. It was getting to the exigence. And this is just a reference. It's a place marker. As a matter of fact, we know it's a place marker because their next sentence is, it's studied in every American history class. And Dr. Martin Luther King is a household name. Neither of these points in the sentence have anything to do with the point of the essay, what it is we're looking to do with this essay. And you can see, so this is really just a kind of introduction that eats up time getting to the point. When we get to the point of this, the thesis sentence, he expresses his unwavering support of Dr. King's method of nonviolence through, here we go, logical support and contrast in his article published in Religious Magazine. So although this person can clearly put a sentence together and has a fine vocabulary, they're not saying anything particularly certain in their thesis. At this point, we know they're going to talk about logical support and contrast. That's a far cry from the specificity that we had with striking diction and historical allusions and moral appeals. Hopefully you can see that this is awfully vague. Anyway, well, let's see where they go with this. He supports his claim throughout his article that nonviolence is more powerful than violence with a strong argument. Again, a vague adjective there, but even if it were a stronger adjective, the best we have here as far as an indication of what we're going to be analyzing now in terms of rhetorical strategy is the strong argument. I'm not sure what that was. Was logical support. All right. Well, let's see what the logic is. At this point, we really ought to have an idea what you're talking about in terms of logic. And instead, we get uses the idea. They tie themselves up here and have difficulty writing what that uses. Uses the idea that nonviolence will attract support to promote nonviolence. Okay, so he suggests that. Not uses the idea. He suggests that nonviolence will attract people's support to promote nonviolence. But at this point, still all we're doing is summarizing his position. I'm still waiting for the analysis. Anyone looking to elicit change, there's no E on that, by the way, wants just that. People on their side. Right, in any argument. Let's start talking about Chavez's argument. By proving that nonviolent results, okay, he argues that nonviolence results in gaining support with evidence such as America's conscience and their yearning for justice. So some good job embedding work in this idea that we are going to say why they're doing it. Chavez convinces his audience, well, he hopes to convince his audience, you can't be sure, convinces his audience and any activists and social reformers that nonviolence is beneficial to any cause. I think he meant to their cause. I would have gone with your first revision. Chavez even refers to history to strengthen the argument, encouraging his readers to learn from the past. Well, at this point, we're looking pretty good because we're getting that precedence. That's the referencing to history that we noticed in. Oh wow! Oh, close that page. Darn it. But that's the stuff that was referenced at the end of the piece where we look back into history. Anyway, so his use of this example dissuades people who are considering violence to achieve their goal from ever attempting it. Again, we don't know that it dissuades them. That's his hope. But what we could have done in most cases, we could have talked about his strategy of helping his readers learn from the past, so to dissuade them from considering violence to achieve their goals. Does that make some sense? It took them a while to get to this point, and wouldn't it have been nicer if it were actually attached to the thing that they had observed? When looking at the consequences, he convinces his audience that nonviolence is the right choice. And again, we don't know that that is true. But we are getting a sentence where they're saying, by doing this, he's trying to accomplish this. And those relationships, the synthesis between the strategy, the message, and the audience is what this whole essay is about, which is why you had to know so many strategies. He uses another tool, contrast. And again, you can see a topic sentence that requires that requires no paragraph. Is contrast. Also, because they were with uses, they were kind of stuck with writing it with this colon here, but you can tell that the entire paragraph, this entire sentence exists for a single word. Just get the word contrast out. Well, why not have the contrast be the subject? You can have the strategy be the subject. You can write so much more. And sure enough, the overall organization of his article follows a certain format. In fact, that format is contrast. So we could have said, by the overall organization of his article as contrasting violence with nonviolence, and then, which really would have been a better opening sentence here. We could have said, there we go. Chavez's overall organization employs a contrast of violence with nonviolence. Instead, it took us all the way down here before we even got to what that contrast was. And then we get a strange, follows that support with a hypothetical if. For example, after his paragraph has been boycott, he has the if. So yeah. The result is similar to that. When he used history as evidence, the readers have this continued comparison in their minds as they read. You don't know that. Nonviolence, good results, violence, bad results. There are so many examples that I showed you, and here's where they actually start to spin their wheels a little more productively. He maintains the comparison through what kind of diction? As well as describing nonviolent protests as powerful, which actually is not an as well, that is the diction, powerful, and the protesters having a just and moral cause, temporary and demoralizing. Meanwhile, violence is described as senseless, temporary, and demoralizing. That's analysis, telling us specifically categorizing those two things, providing that contrast for us. It would be really nice if then they could talk about what the effect of that is a little more economically, but they don't. All strong negative words when describing change. No activist wants their effort to bring revolution and its results to be temporarily successful. They get a little confused with what they're writing there, which defeats the purpose of revolting or senseless. You can see at this point this weird need to explain revolutions and things like that. And you don't need to do that. What you need to do is analyze the piece that's in front of you, considering the exigence that's there. You don't need to explain human behavior. That's why I'm always kind of bothered with people who write sentences like, what people don't realize is it's not your job to explain human behavior. People who do that, that's a cab driver thing. That's not something that you're being asked to do here. But if you're ever driving a cab, by all means, tell us what the way that people are. By perpetuating, which is not me putting down cab drivers, I'm just saying that, having driven a cab myself for a little while, I can tell you, you kind of fall into that as people start asking you about people. By perpetuating this constant contrast between violence and nonviolence and violence, and correlating misspelled the terms. Oh, we're going to find out why they're doing it. Chavez leads his readers to weigh the options and choose what he believes so strongly to be the right one, nonviolence. And that's okay. The fact is, they had all their analysis. They talked about what it was, which was a contrast. They characterized it and then told us exactly why it is that Chavez wanted to do that. So they really start getting going here when they start talking about diction. And that's one of the nice things. If you can find if you can find things in common, if you can find categories of diction in this, I have all the nonviolent diction and all the violent diction that he's using to define these two things. If you can do that with your analysis of diction, you're going to have a lot of really interesting things to say about an essay, which is why diction is a great point, no matter how you're organizing it. That's a good point of development. The conclusion is not so great, but it's not so bad. They pretty much just restate what it is they had to say. And then, according to Chavez, it's not even a choice. Nonviolence is the way to go. In the comments about this, they write about how it seems to be a bit of a rushed ending. We're not going to look at the 3 because you're not going to write a 3. In terms of their comments about this, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry, the 8, as you can see here, pretty much just runs you right through it, but tells you right here that this is the way it's organized. They tell you the shape of it in that thesis quite clearly. The essay clearly demonstrates its control over a wide range of elements of effective writing. And you could see, though, there were some very clear patterns there. There were assertion sentences. There were 3-part and 2-part sentences that indicated why things were happening. There were, as I brought up, that participle phrase at the end of that sentence. And that's really, a well-developed rhetorical analysis with effective prose is always going to get you in that top third. On the other hand, oh, by the way, so here's something that they like. The well-developed structure moved from the analysis of how the diction works to end with a broader point of how it appeals to the audience's beliefs. That's what I'm talking about. And this one, same sort of thing. They pretty much go over the whole thing here. They don't do a good job. They just say it's adequate. Let's see. And then they kind of pick on the conclusion a little bit because they say they just kind of summarize the 2 main points. But despite that, it gets a 6 for adequate rhetorical analysis and generally clear prose. And don't forget, there was some adequate analysis in this. There was plenty of embedded diction in here. There was an indication that they knew some terminology when they talked about comparison and contrast. It was an organized piece. So for all of the things that I picked on in here, also notice all the things that worked extremely well in this. I shouldn't say extremely well, but some of the things that worked very well in this piece. So finally, what I wanted to show you were the frequently asked questions about this one. and what they had to say about why people were successful or not successful about this particular essay. The one thing they say here is that the terminology was selected to emphasize the primacy of authorial agency and communicative purpose over the implementation of formal tropes in the text. What they mean by that is that what the author's saying and what the author's choosing to do to communicate their points, that's the important thing. The formal tropes, the rhetorical strategies, those things serve the author's purpose. Got me? Somebody give some feedback. Let me know you're live out there. Let me know you're live. I feel like a DJ, but with like no listeners. Come on, give me a comment. I'm not talking again until I get another comment. Do, 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 do. Mm-hmm. Nothing. You rotten kids. Then we gotta wait for alive. Woo! All right. So finally, let's see. The high-scoring essays were coherent. They had some purposeful development. Let's see. They didn't just offer one or more pieces of textual evidence to support a single analytical claim. They produced an argument. This is why you've got to remember, this is an argument as well. That's why I tell you that your assertion sentences are not just topics that you're going to talk about. They're an argument that he made his choices with a specific purpose in sight and that they work together in that service. This is the sentence you want to really remember tonight. This thing right here. All right? You're writing an argument. If they did poorly, it's probably because they had strictly stylistic analysis, focusing on formal features of the text and offering little explanation of how they served the overall rhetorical purpose within a particular rhetorical and historical situation. Oh, speaking of the word particular, the word certain was in this. Where is it? In the crummy one. Whenever, where's the word certain in here? It kills me. Whenever you see the word certain or particular, there it is. The organization follows a certain format. You can be quite certain, if you're using the word certain in this case, in this way, for like certain or particular, that you are being anything but certain or particular. And I do see this a lot in your essays where people talk about a certain this or a certain that or a particular this or a particular that. You're not being certain or particular when you do that. So write particularly, don't tell me that there's something particular or certain going on. That's usually that weird thing where, you know, earlier when you were younger, the teacher would tell you to not just tell me all at once, like, you know, give me some suspense. Don't bother with that. I said a lot of kids made mistakes. If you want a low score, make it disorganized. Make some unrelated points. Maybe do the 5-paragraph theme instead of an argument. Let's see. And that doesn't really matter. Stronger essays analyze the text in either situation and develop a connection. Here it is again, between his intentions and the impact the text had upon them when they encountered it several decades later. Oh, I'm sorry. These are the really strong ones. And you can do this in your introduction, your conclusion, maybe. You make you distinguish between the historical moments of the composition when the thing was written and reading it yourself. The difference between yourself as the target audience and them. I think the only real place to do this is in your conclusion. I don't think this is the central, this does not get at the central question of the essay to talk about how it's different now. But it seems to me that if you're looking at that Lincoln's second inaugural and the animosity that he is trying to keep from being heaped upon the South, that unity, if you're to talk about how that unity never really stuck now in your conclusion, I think that's a really intelligent comment to make. And the same thing about people fighting, like Alfred Green's thing, people fighting for things that they don't really believe in, or if you can, or they not that they don't believe in, but that they don't feel deserves that sacrifice, Or if you consider, the children working now and, relating that to, like Chinese workers or any of those other situations where children are working now, and how ironic it is that we now buy those items, but they're from other countries. Again, there's no place for that, I think, in the body of your work. There might be in your introduction, and there certainly is in your conclusion. That delineation, that difference between the audiences, between the intended audience and you as a modern audience, is an interesting proposition for a conclusion. Finally, just so you know, my rhetorical plan is this. I make sure that who's this? There we go. Here's some things that I make sure that I look at. I make sure that I know some terminology so I can refer to it as quickly as I can. And this is really worth looking at here. Exigence, urgency. I want you to notice how we did all this. We identified this stuff right away. We identified the purpose right away. What did he want the audience to do? Who is the audience? What is the relationship between the audience and the things that they're writing about? He talked about how people did not, how people were frustrated and seething and how they really didn't want to be nonviolent. By the way, did you notice how many things that I noted that didn't show up in the really good essay? That's okay. That's all right. Find some stuff and have it fill up and have it be a strong argument for the use of those rhetorical strategies to get a point across. What you miss doesn't matter nearly as much as what you get. And then, as you can see, logos here, the logical argument that was made specifically regarding to precedent, and the causal arguments that he was making in that first half of it, where he was talking about what the possible consequences would be. That's a logical argument. The appeals to character and credibility had everything to do with him using those historical allusions, specifically bringing in people like Gandhi, Martin Luther King, the authority of the American people, and of course, God. Pathos fits really well into that, although he did not, the writing was so clear and simple. The sentences were so short and direct. It did appear as if, with the exception of the beauty of his words, he was not nearly as concerned with creating a rhythm or using figurative language, which is something we often look for in these nonfiction pieces, a use of figurative language to appeal to the emotions of the audience, which is usually, that's why that's right there. Imagery and figurative language are very effective tools of pathos. As you can see, that diction got looked at very well in this piece. So hopefully that framework's of some use to you as well. My plan was answer the question in your thesis, and the better writer did that. Determine the author's structure and organize around their structure. We couldn't do that. His piece was not organized in a way that allowed us to do that. At least I didn't feel it was. I'm sure some of you watching probably could. Identifying the position against which he's arguing as context was all of that stuff about how people are seething and they don't want to be nonviolent. Identifying the tone and the diction. Diction is huge throughout this, but always throwing some sort of adjective in there for yourself that you can always refer back to and build from. Very important there. Talked about this, uses and shows. We talked about how we want to make the strategy the subject and how the writing is just always better if you can do that. When you revise, those are the things that you fix. I would also combine some sentences in that way that I talked about, turning a sentence that says this blank into a participle. If you don't remember that, go back about a half an hour. Get to the point, make them assertions. We talked about this and this. And if you can end up with a rhetorical flourish, I would do that. The rhetorical flourish that's in his is that he talks about, he tries not to have a rhetorical flourish. In fact, his call to action is almost a call to inaction in a way, although he would call nonviolent resistance action. But his action was, he said, we can wait, which is an interesting call to action that I might have commented on as an ironic twist for a conclusion. So consider that that's another conclusion strategy that you can employ. You might want to decide for yourself, what is my opening strategy going to be? What shapes can I consider? And again, that's just, strategies or rhetorical structure. And then finally, a couple good ideas that I just gave you for conclusions. Tomorrow, I'm going to go over a synthesis essay like this, and also we're going to do some. We'll take a look at a rhetorical. We're going to take a look at a couple responses to the the open-ended prompt. Since we just did that in a half an hour, once I get something to drink real quick, and by drink I mean coffee. Allow me to show you this coffee here. Nope, there's not that. I don't know how to do this anymore. I wonder where I am on this. Stop sharing my screen. Okay, that means you get to see my face, right? But I can't find it. Anyway, this is coffee. And I'll be back in a half an hour with the open-ended response, which will be a lot faster. Good day. Now I have to figure out how to turn this off. Oh, Vanessa's like 3 comments. Oh, well, here it is. I'm so stupid. Oh, now that I know you're all alive, I wonder if this is still on. Hey, tell me if this is still on, comment page. Is this still on? I just lost the comments again. Wait. Still on now? It's still on. Okay. Is that true? Tell me if this is on. Say it's on. Okay. Apparently it's not on. Darn. It's so on. You're a rotten kid. Let's see. Oh, so you can see me with my old man glasses on. Terrific. So you can see me. All right. How do I turn this thing off? I will be turning this off soon. I'm just going to close the thing. Good night. I'll see you in a half an hour.